My name is Melanie. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about 3 ways to get ready for your coming growing season while you still have snow on the ground. Around the end of February, the urge to get your hands into some dirt and to start growing comes on strong. For me, I live in the North Okanagan at 2,200 feet in the mountains. At the end of February, we have anywhere between 3 to 4 feet of snow still on the ground. Because I live somewhere where we get full-on winter, it can be a little disheartening when you start to see all of these get ready for spring videos that tend to start coming out around this time of year.
Especially when it looks like this outside.
So I thought it might be helpful if I share with you a few ways that I get ready for the coming growing season while we still have 3 feet of snow on the ground. Number 1, prioritization and time management. Here in the North Okanagan, we have made it to the end of February, which means we have been relatively stuck inside for the last 3-4 months. This gives you a lot of time to sit and wonder, ponder, and daydream, coming up with a lot of really fanciful and larger-than-life ideas for your coming growing season. Prioritizing and setting realistic expectations can be really hard, but it's also really important to help guarantee that you're going to have a productive and successful coming growing season. Here at Tamterra, my mother and I sat down and created a master list. On this list, we included all of our garden plans, as well as any other projects that we have going on here at the property. When you're making this master list, I encourage you to include projects that are outside of your garden. This way, you have a clearer understanding of how much time you're going to have in the coming spring and summer months, so you know the time that you can realistically dedicate to your garden or other projects on your property. Once we created this master list full of dreams and big ideas here at Tamterra, we started to narrow down and prioritize this list by asking ourselves a few key questions. What do we already have half done? Do we have any supplies or specific equipment already laying around here on the property that we can use for a specific project? Do we have to complete a project in order to be able to start another project? How big or time-consuming is this project going to be? What gives us the most bang for our buck? What's the most easy project to achieve that makes our lives significantly easier? What excites us and brings us the most joy? Do we make any kind of income by completing a project? These questions are really helpful in narrowing down the priorities and the order in which we're going to tackle our projects come springtime. Especially the questions like, do we need to complete this project in order to start another project? Are we going to be able to make passive income off of completing this project? Do we need to complete this project before we can start other projects? This is really getting clear on our timeline for the coming months. This brings us to number 2, inventory. Now that we have a clear understanding of the projects we're going to be tackling in the coming months, it's important to go through all of your supplies, your gear, and figure out what you have and what you're going to need to get in order to complete these projects. I always start my inventory with my equipment and my supply lists. For example, one of the first projects that usually occurs on a homestead in the spring will be starting your seeds for the garden. I keep my supply lists separated by projects, so in my head I will go through the entire process of seed starting and start doing an inventory list of what I have and what I'm going to need to purchase. I'll look at things like my seed starting trays. Do they have leaks? Do I need to buy new ones, or am I good to go? I'll look at my potting soil or if I need a seed starting mix. All of those things go on an inventory list and subsequently a shopping list. The second type of inventory we're going to talk about will be seed inventory. There are a lot of different ways to keep a seed inventory, and I actually encourage you to change how you do this every season. That way you can narrow down the things you like, the things you don't like, and can really tailor it for you and your experience. Over the seasons, I have categorized things really broadly into root vegetables or brassicas or squash, for example. But as my seed catalog and inventory has grown, as it does, I have started to narrow down these categories. So as opposed to just having beans, I will have a category now for pole beans, bush beans, and broad beans. This way I can keep it a lot easier to find what I'm looking for on my little inventory list, but I also have a better idea of the different types of varieties that I have so I can stack and plan my garden accordingly. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to want to be creating a shopping list while you're doing your inventories for both your supplies and equipment and your seeds. The reason I start doing things like a seed inventory and supply lists so early as February, which is several months before I can start a lot of these projects here at Tamterra, is because it allows me enough time to shop around and connect with community in order to potentially fill some of these needs without having to buy new or spend a lot of money. When you know what you're going to need for a project and you have a few months to shop around, you can check in on used building supply places, Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji, Castanet. You can put postings online asking if anyone has any reused lumber or if they're getting rid of stuff that you can come and pick up. It saves you a lot of money and it can give you a really good opportunity to connect with people in your community. The same thing applies to your seed shopping list. A lot of different communities will host seed swaps, for example, so you can bring in some seeds that you have a plethora of and trade for something that you've been looking for, and it allows you to connect with local growers in your area. Another benefit I have found of doing my seed inventory so early is that it really helps me combat the long waiting times and shipping times that have been a lot more prevalent over the last few years. With the huge push in homesteading and self-reliance and preparedness that we have seen, a lot of seed companies have been maxed to capacity. So having a clear list of what you're looking for gives you a few months to put your feelers out there, check in on websites, sign up for emailing lists, talk to your friends. Like I said, you can look on Facebook Marketplace, Kijiji. It just gives you the time you might need in order to find what you're looking for. I'll link to my video on cold stratification up in the cards, but this is another thing you want to keep an eye out for while you're doing your seed inventory. A lot of seeds require being stratified for upwards of 3 months, and the sooner you know and have a list of the seeds you need to do something extra for in order to ensure germination, the better prepared you are to be able to plant those seeds in the spring. If you have no idea what cold stratification is, like I said, I'll link to that video up in the cards. We're on to number 3, which is the layout. We have an understanding of what projects and how much time we have to dedicate to our garden in the coming months. We know the equipment and supplies we're going to need, and we have an idea of the seeds that we're working with. At this point, we've got to figure out what this season is going to look like and how we're going to lay out our garden beds. I am an extremely visual person, and this is my favorite part. Absolute favorite part. You get to sit down with a piece of paper, you get to draw some stuff, you get to figure out what is going where. I don't know how to tell you how fun this is. If you're like me and live in a northern climate, you haven't really spent a lot of time out there in a few months. So it's always good to refresh your mental image of the space you're working with, even if that means you have to brave the weather outside. Maybe some beans up in here, some squash over here, some raspberries down there. We'll also have some peas here. Yeah, by the end of February, things get a little weird out here. The first thing I want to bring up when we're discussing laying out our garden is how pivotal it is for you to allow yourself to change this layout as many times as you need to. This is not a permanent plan. This is not written in stone. This is a troubleshooting exercise. It is a lot easier for you to change where you're going to put an entire potato patch on a piece of paper than it is for you to go outside and move an entire potato patch. So please allow yourself the freedom and the creative leeway to have fun with this and to start troubleshooting and problem solving now when there is minimal work or effort involved, as opposed to later when you have to physically move things. This is the point of creating a layout before you create a garden space. A tool that I have really enjoyed using this season is actually this planter app. I am in no way associated or sponsored by this app, and I am positive there are hundreds of apps out there that do the exact same thing. This app allows me to change the dimensions of the garden space. It allows me to enter information like my last and first frost date and how many frost-free days I have in a season. It gives me information on planting specific plants, so things like pests that plant may be susceptible to, as well as diseases, the sun requirements and the water requirements, as well as suggestions on companion planting. Like I said, I am sure there are a lot of apps that do the exact same thing that this one does, but I have really enjoyed using this planter app, and I would highly recommend that you get one and start to play around with some different combinations and layouts for your garden beds. Not to mention, this is a fantastic way to burn 3, 4, 5 hours on one of those dark, cold winter nights. There's a few things I like to keep in mind and I'm going to share with you while I'm considering the layouts for my garden beds. Here at Tamterra, I have a variety of garden beds. I have in-ground garden beds, I have no-dig garden beds, I have raised garden beds, and we also grow in planters. So one of the first things I like to consider is what types of plants do best in what garden bed. For a really obvious example, I don't like to grow a lot of root crops in planter pots, so I keep those in the in-ground garden beds or the no-dig beds. Succession planting. How long is your growing season, and do you have enough time to succession plant specific varieties? Sun and wind exposure, both very important when you're choosing to put different plants in different locations. Companion planting. Now, admittedly, companion planting can get really complicated and is in no way an exact science. So take what you will from it, use it if it helps you, but it's something I definitely keep in mind when I'm planning out my garden space. I also like to consider things that are of visual interest. So I like to plan garden beds with height in mind. If I want to have a nice backdrop that will double as a windbreak for everything else that is in that garden bed. What color of different flowers am I putting in different areas? Do I have herbs that are lower to the ground and serve as ground cover? Considering this kind of visual 3D way of planning out a garden not only helps with making the area aesthetic and therefore making you want to be in your garden more, but it can also be really important when you're companion planting or wanting to have ground cover or trying to attract specific pollinators. So take a 3D look at your garden, figure out the levels, the heights, the density of the plants you're working with, as well as the colors. If you create a space that you want to be in and the birds and the bumblebees and the butterflies want to be in, it's going to be all the better growing for you. The last big consideration for me when I'm laying out my garden is how much attention a specific crop needs. For example, things like my potato patch and my corn are a lot further away from my house. Things like zucchini, cherry tomatoes, peas, I have to monitor those things and make sure I'm staying up on the harvesting and picking of the fruit so that the plant continues to produce. I don't need to visit my potato patch until it's harvest time. I just have to make sure it's getting watered. So the amount of attention and effort dictates how far away from me this crop is going to be. I have had an absolute hoot making this video for you. I hope you find some of these ideas beneficial and helpful to see you through to your gardening season and spring. If you are a northern gardener, I would love to hear from you in the comments below if you have specific things that you start doing months in advance that prepares you for your coming growing seasons. I, for one, know I follow a lot of YouTube channels here that are wonderful and informative, but they're usually a lot more southern than me. So if you have any other YouTube channels that are either Canadian gardeners, northern climate gardeners, gardeners who live in an area where they get 5 feet of snow and just have to deal with it gardeners, let us know in the comments below. We gotta look out for each other in our frigid little areas of the world. As always, may the force be with you, happy growing, and I'll see you all back here very shortly with another video. Bye!